Doug Daniel again from Pilots Online Academy, making superior piloting simple. Stalls, detection and recovery. Here's what you'll learn. Stalls are mostly bad, but sometimes good. Why you want to become really good at detecting and recovering from stalls, and what causes a stall and what doesn't. How to practice stalls and do it safely. And common mistakes. Causes of a stall. Well, there's only one, and it is boundary layer separation. If you're not familiar with boundary layer separation, you can find it in my ebook on aerodynamics. There is only one situation where a stall occurs, and that's when the wing or any other airfoil exceeds its critical angle of attack. Anything that causes the wing to exceed that critical angle of attack, such as increased load, high G, turn, etc., can be thought of as causing a stall. Okay, so we're going to look at a airfoil, a wing, at the Cambridge University in England's wind tunnel, and I want you to notice the smooth flow over the upper surface. Now these are actually smoke trails that originally were introduced. The wind is blowing from the left to the right, and at various places a little trail of smoke is introduced to the wind so that we can see what the influence of this wing has on the air flowing around it. And initially this is a high lift situation in that all of the air is flowing smoothly around the wing. So I am now about to increase the angle of attack. I want you to focus on the air above and downstream of the wing. This would be above the wing, and this is downstream over here. This is the burbling that signals an imminent stall. Now look at the picture, and I'm going to increase the angle of attack. There. Now you see it's all confused back here. And this sometimes detaches from the wing, sometimes doesn't detach from the wing, and you can feel it in your elevator control when this happens. Now let me increase the angle of attack a little bit more, and this is going to force the flow separation. This is a stall. Now look right in there while I increase the angle of attack. Notice now the wind is completely separated from the top of the wing, and you can see this is smoke is so stirred up that it just disappears because there's just not enough smoke for it to show up. Okay, because the wind is no longer curving smoothly over the top surface and creating a partial vacuum with centrifugal force, the top surface cannot produce lift. Just the high pressure on the bottom produces lift, so the wing has lost about 2/3 of its lift. Of course, that means the airplane is going to start, it'll feel like you're in a falling elevator, but it's not quite that dramatic. Some stalls are good, others are bad. I've already said that. Without me telling you, you've figured out that in straight and level flight, a stall happens when the airplane is going so slow that it cannot produce enough lift. Of course, as it slows down, it has to increase the angle of attack, and eventually it increases the angle of attack to the point that it exceeds the critical angle of attack. The air separates from the boundary layer of air, separates from the upper surface, and the airplane loses lift. But this is the ideal condition for a landing. The slower the airplane lands, the easier it is to stop, and the less likely it is that a gust will pick the airplane up off of the ground and do dastardly things to it. So if the wing can't lift the airplane, the brake should be more effective. That's the good situation. Here's the bad one. Suppose you are 200 feet up, turning to line up with the runway, and you stall. Well, I've been telling you that if you want to lift your nose, pull back on the controls. Here's the really bad news and why this lesson is so important. The worst thing you can do in that situation is what you've been trained to do: pull back on the controls. With that motivational bit behind us, you need to practice stall detection and recovery until you don't think. You just react correctly. The aviation authorities decided it would be clever to have pilots practice stall recovery when the stall warning first sounded. I have to admit that it seems reasonable when I first heard it. Then Air France, flying from Rio in Brazil to Charles de Gaulle in Paris, or as the French say, Charles de Gaulle, crashed a new Airbus, killing everybody on board. It was discovered that the stall warning never worked, and the pilot flying the airplane did not detect the stall. So he pulled back on the controls, never realizing in the next 30,000 feet that he was screwing up. So here are the fundamentals of stall recovery. First, you need to know that you are in a stall or about to be. Since a stall is caused by excessive angle of attack and the elevator is the angle of attack control, you want to push forward on the elevator and not backwards, because pushing it forward reduces your angle of attack below the critical angle of attack. And here's the tricky point. All airplane wings stall before their tails do. This results in the nose pitching down because the tail is still efficiently producing lift and the wing isn't. It's going to take some pretty good training for the pilot to stall at 200 feet, see if the nose is unexpectedly pointed well below the horizon, and calmly push the nose further down. But that's what you've got to do. You can detect the impending stall when the stall warning sounds off, and if that doesn't work, the airplane will start to shudder just before it stalls. It's that if that doesn't get your attention, you're probably going to stall. You know you've stalled because the nose suddenly pitches down without any input from you. Now is the time to start recovery procedures. Simultaneously apply full power and pitch down some. Don't overdo it, but do it now. Often, pitching down simply requires that you relax the back pressure that you've been exerting on the elevator control. Just allow it to go back to neutral. Almost no airplane wing stalls from root to tip all at once. Some do, but they've been designed to stall at the root, so the stall will be less violent and your ailerons out at the wing tips will still be working during the stall recovery. You really have to work hard to stall the entire wing in a modern production airplane. If you panic and clutch the elevator control to your chest, you increase the probability that you will stall the entire wing and enter a spin. The subject of spin recovery is beyond the scope of this lesson. After you have addressed the power and pitch parts of the stall recovery, the next thing to do is level the wings. Within a fraction of a second, if you reacted properly, the wing will be flying normally and you can and should start leveling off and climbing. Precautions before practicing stalls. Once again, clearing turns. Scan the airspace near, above, and below the practice area. You'll want to do 2 turns, at least one in each direction, looking above and below as well as horizontally. The turns get the wings out of your field of view. Now you need to build skill, and with skill comes confidence by a series of progressively more challenging stalls. Start with the easiest, simplest, safest, and least frightening stall. This builds skill, but more importantly, it builds confidence. You should know that stalls can really scare you, not because practicing is dangerous, but because the airplane with you in it can suddenly fall like a stone. After a few dental stalls, they start to feel more like a carnival ride than a near-death experience. Panic is when pilots do foolish and dangerous things. Familiarity with stalls and repeated success certainly reduces the chance of panic. In the following slides, we progress from the least to the most challenging of stalls. So a power off straight ahead stall is the most benign. So pick a point on the horizon, fly directly toward it in straight and level flight. Does this sound familiar to you? Reduce power to idle. Maintain a constant heading and altitude as the airplane slows. You will need to slowly pitch up to compensate for the loss of lift caused by the loss of airspeed. Once you hear the Cessna's stall warning sound, smoothly advance the throttle, remembering to compensate for the sudden increase in P factor by pushing on the right rudder pedal. Drop the nose slightly to accelerate more quickly. See, what you've done is you've started to recovery just from the sound of the stall warning. Once the stall warning silences, return to level flight until you've reached your best rate of climb airspeed, then climb. Throughout the exercise, keep the wings level and the ball centered. Oh, that is terribly important. Really important. You need to make sure you do that. Power off straight ahead stall with flaps. Follow the same procedure as without flaps, except in straight and level flight at idle power. Once the airspeed indicator needle enters the white arc, deploy full flaps. The white arc on the airspeed indicator indicates the airspeed that is safe to deploy flaps. During the stall recovery, after applying full power, retract the flaps. Don't forget to keep the wings level and the ball centered throughout the entire exercise. An approach stall. This stall simulates an approach to landing but results in a stall. Set up a straight ahead, idle power, carb heat, full flap glide at 60 knots. This is assuming you're in a Cessna 152. Slowly lift the nose until you stall. Now here I didn't say until you hear the stall warning, I said until you stall. So you're going to feel the shuddering and then the nose is going to drop, and that's going to tell you you're in a stall. Apply full power and turn off the carb heat. I do that all at the same time. Use my right hand to push the throttle all the way in smoothly, not too fast, and then I use the thumb on my left hand to push against the carb heat control, and so I ended up pushing the carb heat and the throttle all the way to the firewall at the same time. Lower the nose to a slightly nose-low attitude while retracting the flaps. Once the stall warning is silenced and the flaps retracted slowly without entering a secondary stall, lift the nose to best angle of climb attitude. You won't be at that airspeed, but get it in the right attitude, hold the attitude, and let the airplane accelerate to the best angle of climb airspeed. Then it'll start climbing. Don't forget to keep the wings level and the ball centered throughout the exercise. A departure stall. This is the hairiest of all the stalls. This stall simulates a runway departure where the pilot climbed too steeply. With flaps fully retracted and full power, climb at the best angle of climb airspeed, about 60 knots. Slowly lift the nose until the stall. This is where you should be very serious about P factor compensation if you want to avoid spin practice. Lower the nose to slightly nose-low attitude. Once the stall warning is silenced, slowly retract without entering a secondary stall. Lift the nose to best angle of climb attitude. Don't forget to keep the wings level and the ball centered throughout the exercise. I keep repeating it because I really want you to be a true believer to this. It is very important, and you'll be a better pilot for it. Okay, the things you need to be careful about. Letting the airplane become cross-controlled, in other words, the ball not centered, is probably the most common flying mistake that pilots make. It is what makes stalls dangerous. And when I was the president of a flying club, I hope I don't tell you this story too many times, one of the members of the flying club took off high altitude in an airplane with a powerful engine, obviously forgot about the rudder pedals, and stalled, spun in, killed himself and his entire family. Pushing the nose too far down. It's tempting to do that, but you just don't need to. This results in unnecessary loss of altitude. Trying to pull out too fast, this could result in another stall called a secondary stall. So here's what you've learned. Stalls are mostly bad, but sometimes good. While you want to become really good at detecting and recovering from stalls, what causes a stall and what doesn't, and how to practice stalls and do it safely. And of course the common mistakes. So next we're going to jump into ground track maneuvers. Turns around a point, S-turns, rectangular patterns. These are exercises that are valuable because they teach compensating for the wind. You need to compensate for the wind when you're close to the ground because that tells you what the wind is doing. Now you'll be 1,000 feet up and there's a good chance the wind will be blowing not quite as strong and from a slightly different direction when you get close to the ground, but you need to learn how to compensate for the wind and use it to tell you that compensation, to tell you what the wind's doing. You also need to divide your attention between outside and inside the cockpit. These are skills needed in the airport traffic area. Once again, my disclaimer. And so I am Doug Daniel from the Pilots Online Academy, making superior piloting simple.